Chapter 1. The quiet after the glitter. James Sylvin stared at the blinking cursor on his laptop screen like it was mocking him. The words Happy New Year glowed faintly from a half-written email draft to his daughter, Emma. He wanted to say something profound, something that would make her laugh and feel loved across the hundreds of miles between them. Instead, he typed, "Hope you're having fun, kiddo. Don't forget to eat something green. Love you." He sighed, hit send, and closed the laptop. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't just settle in your ears but pressed against your chest like a weight. Once upon a time, this same house had been a carnival of noise. Tea parties in the living room, glitter bombs in the kitchen, and Emma's giggles echoing down the hallway like music. Now, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards, reminding him he wasn't entirely alone, just close enough. James leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. 40 wasn't old, but it wasn't young either. It was that strange middle ground where you still felt like you had time, but the mirror kept whispering otherwise. He wasn't bitter about the divorce. Not really. He understood why she left. 17 years was a long time to be married to someone who preferred stability over fireworks. He gave her stability. She wanted fireworks. End of story. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. Outside, distant pops of fireworks punctuated the winter air. James considered stepping out to watch, but the idea of standing alone in the cold felt like a metaphor he didn't want to live out tonight. Instead, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and wandered into the living room. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner, stripped of ornaments but stubbornly refusing to let go of its needles. A rogue piece of glitter caught his eye on the coffee table. He picked it up, smiling faintly. "Emma," he murmured, as if saying her name could summon her back. It didn't, of course. Magic wasn't real, except maybe in the way a child could turn a Tuesday afternoon into an enchanted kingdom with nothing but a tiara and a plastic teapot. He sank onto the couch, sipping his drink. The whiskey burned, but in a good way, like honesty. He thought about all the people who treated parenting like a chore, like something to survive rather than savor. James never understood that. Being Emma's dad was the best thing he'd ever done. Not just the title, the whole messy, glitter-strewn experience. He missed it. He missed being needed. A sudden boom rattled the windows, followed by a shriek of laughter outside. James set down his glass and peered through the blinds. His neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, was in her driveway, waving a sparkler like a warrior princess, while her teenage sons launched fireworks that looked suspiciously illegal. James chuckled. "Happy New Year, Mrs. Callahan," he muttered, watching a rocket shoot sideways and explode in a shower of green sparks dangerously close to her mailbox. The doorbell rang. James blinked. Who rings a doorbell at midnight on New Year's Eve? He opened the door to find Mrs. Callahan herself, cheeks flushed from the cold and the thrill of pyrotechnics. "James," she exclaimed, thrusting a plate of something vaguely pastry-like toward him. "Happy New Year. Thought you could use some company." James hesitated, then smiled. "Thanks, but I'm good. Just keeping the couch warm." "Nonsense," she said, pushing the plate into his hands. "You've been holed up in here like a hermit since Emma left for college. Come outside. Live a little." James laughed softly. "I appreciate it, but I think I'll pass. Fireworks and I have a complicated relationship." Mrs. Callahan squinted at him. "You're too young to be this boring, James Sylvin." He grinned. "Tell that to my ex-wife." She snorted. "Her loss. Anyway, eat the pastries. They're store-bought, but I put them on a fancy plate." With that, she trotted back to her driveway, sparkler blazing like a tiny sword. James closed the door, shaking his head. He set the plate on the counter and returned to the couch. Outside, the fireworks crescendoed, painting the sky in colors that felt almost defiant. James raised his glass in a silent toast. "To new beginnings," he whispered. The clock struck midnight. Somewhere people kissed. Somewhere, resolutions were made and promptly broken. And in a quiet house that still held the ghosts of glitter bombs, James Sylvin sat alone. Content enough, but not quite whole. Chapter 2. The coffee shop collision. James Sylvin believed in rituals. Not the mystical kind with candles and chanting, just the small, ordinary ones that made life feel less like a freefall. His favorite ritual was Saturday morning coffee at Bean There, brewed that, a cozy cafe tucked between a yoga studio and a boutique that sold scarves priced like mortgage payments. It was January 3rd, and the world outside was still nursing its holiday hangover. The streets were slushy, the sky a dull gray, and James's mood matched both. He pushed open the cafe door, greeted by the warm hum of conversation and the scent of roasted beans that could almost pass for happiness. He ordered his usual black coffee, no sugar, and scanned the room for an empty table. Most were occupied by people tapping on laptops or pretending to read novels while eavesdropping on strangers. James spotted a small table near the window and made his way over, balancing his cup like it was a fragile artifact. That's when it happened. A blur of motion, a sharp gasp, and then impact. Hot coffee sloshed over the rim of his cup, cascading down his sleeve like molten regret. James froze, staring at the woman who had collided with him. She was juggling a paper bag, a phone, and what appeared to be a scarf that had declared war on gravity. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed, eyes wide. "I am so sorry." James blinked, assessing the damage. His sleeve was a crime scene, his dignity slightly bruised. But the woman's expression, equal parts horror and embarrassment, softened the blow. "It's fine," he said, forcing a smile. "Adds character to the shirt." She groaned, fumbling for napkins. "No, seriously, oh, this is a disaster. I'm usually coordinated. Well, not usually, but sometimes. Occasionally. Okay, never." James chuckled despite himself. "You're doing great. Really." She handed him a wad of napkins, her fingers brushing his as she did. "I'm Clara, by the way. Professional klutz." "James," he replied, dabbing at his sleeve. "Professional guy who gets coffee spilled on him, apparently." Clara laughed, a bright, unfiltered sound that made the gray day feel less oppressive. "I swear I'm not always like this. It's just, my phone rang, my bag ripped, and then you appeared like some kind of coffee magnet." James raised an eyebrow. "Coffee magnet? That's a new one." "Don't knock it," she said, grinning. "Could be your superpower." He smirked. "Not exactly the heroic image I had in mind." Clara tilted her head, studying him with eyes the color of strong tea. "You look like someone who could pull off heroic. Maybe in a rom-com. You know, the brooding single dad who secretly has a heart of gold." James blinked. "That's oddly specific." She shrugged. "I watch a lot of movies." Before James could respond, Clara's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and groaned. "Of course, my car's dead. Because why wouldn't it be? Perfect ending to a perfect morning." James hesitated. He could walk away, finish his coffee, and let her wrestle with fate. But something, maybe the way her scarf was still losing its battle with gravity, made him say, "Need a jump?" Clara looked up, surprised. "You'd do that?" "Sure," James said. "I've got cables in the trunk. And a functioning car." Her smile returned, brighter than the cafe lights. "You might just be my hero after all." 10 minutes later, James found himself in the parking lot, crouched beside Clara's car like a man auditioning for a mechanic-themed reality show. Snowflakes drifted lazily around them, settling on his hair and her scarf, which had finally surrendered and now hung like a defeated flag. "Do you do this often?" Clara asked, watching him connect the cables. "Jump cars? Or rescue strangers from caffeine-related disasters?" James replied, "Both." He grinned. "Not really, but I'm adaptable." Clara leaned against her car, arms crossed. "Adaptable. I like that. My ex was the opposite. He had a meltdown when a restaurant ran out of his favorite wine." James chuckled. "Sounds fun." "Oh, it was a blast," she said dryly. "Anyway, thanks for this. I owe you." James shrugged. "You don't owe me anything." Clara's eyes sparkled with mischief. "How about lunch? My treat. Assuming my car decides to cooperate." James hesitated. Lunch. With a stranger who spilled coffee on him and called him a rom-com archetype. It sounded reckless, which, for James, was practically a foreign language. But something in Clara's smile made him want to learn. "Lunch sounds good," he said finally. Clara beamed. "Great. There's a little diner down the street. Best pancakes in town." James raised an eyebrow. "Pancakes for lunch? Don't judge," she said, mock stern. "Pancakes are a lifestyle." James laughed, shaking his head. "Lead the way." As they drove to the diner, Clara's car miraculously revived. James felt a strange lightness in his chest. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something. A spark, maybe. The kind that could start a fire if given half a chance. And for the first time in a long time, James didn't mind the idea of a little heat. Chapter 3. The accidental hero. James Sylvin wasn't sure what surprised him more. That Clara's car actually started after the jump, or that he was now sitting across from her in a diner that looked like it had been frozen in time since 1978. The vinyl booths were cracked. The jukebox in the corner was more decorative than functional, and the waitress called everyone Han, like it was a legal requirement. Clara stirred her coffee with the kind of intensity usually reserved for solving world crises. "You know," she said, glancing up at him, "you didn't have to do this." James raised an eyebrow. "What? Rescue you from the parking lot or agree to pancakes for lunch?" "Both," she said, smiling. "Most people would have just handed me the jumper cables and wished me luck." James shrugged. "I'm not most people." Clara grinned. "Clearly. Most people don't look like they walked out of a catalog for responsible adults who own jumper cables." James chuckled. "That's oddly specific." "Specific is my brand," she said, taking a sip of coffee. "So, James Sylvin, what's your story? Besides being a caffeine magnet and part-time superhero." James hesitated. He wasn't used to talking about himself. For years, his identity had been wrapped up in being Emma's dad and someone's husband. Now he was just James, and that felt both liberating and terrifying. "I'm 40, he said finally. "Divorced. Single dad, though my daughter's in college now, so mostly just single." Clara nodded, her expression softening. "That's a big shift." "Yeah," James said, staring at his coffee. The house feels empty. I miss the noise, the chaos. Glitter bombs in the kitchen. Clara laughed. Glitter bombs. Emma went through a phase, James said, smiling at the memory. Everything was a party. Even Tuesday nights. Clara's eyes warmed. Sounds like you were a good dad. James shrugged. I tried. Still do, even from a distance. Clara reached for the syrup, her fingers brushing his again. Accidentally, but enough to make James notice. For what it's worth, she said. You seem like the kind of guy who takes care of people. That's rare. James felt a flicker of something, pride, maybe, or hope. What about you? He asked, eager to shift the spotlight. What's your story? Clara smirked. Oh, 38. Marketing consultant. Professional klutz. Recently single, which is why I'm currently eating pancakes instead of pretending to enjoy kale with someone who thinks brunch is a personality trait. James laughed. Sounds like you dodged a bullet. More like a cannonball, Clara said, rolling her eyes. He was allergic to dogs. Who's allergic to dogs? That's basically being allergic to happiness. James grinned. So, you like dogs? Love them, Clara said. I volunteer at a shelter on weekends. Best therapy in the world. James nodded. I had a dog growing up. Max Golden Retriever. He thought he was a lapdog. Clara's eyes lit up. Golden Retrievers are the best. Big, goofy optimists. James smiled. Kind of like you. Clara blinked, then laughed. A bright, surprised sound that made James feel like he just scored a point in a game he didn't know he was playing. Careful, she said, wagging a finger. Flattery will get you more pancakes. James chuckled. Noted. The waitress appeared with their plates. Towering stacks of pancakes glistening under a generous drizzle of syrup. Clara clapped her hands like a kid on Christmas morning. See? She said. Pancakes are happiness. James took a bite, savoring the sweetness. You might be onto something. Clara leaned back, studying him. You're different. James raised an eyebrow. Different how? Most guys I meet are either trying too hard or not trying at all, she said. You're just you. No pretense. James shrugged. I don't have the energy for pretense. Clara smiled. Good. I like that. James felt the words settle in his chest like a warm ember. He wasn't sure what this was. Lunch, a coincidence, the start of something. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. After lunch, they walked back to the parking lot. Clara's car started without protest this time, as if it had decided to behave for the man with jumper cables. Thanks again, Clara said, sliding into the driver's seat. You really saved the day. James smiled. Anytime. Clara hesitated, then leaned out the window. Hey, James? Yeah. Don't be a stranger. James watched her drive away, her scarf fluttering like a victory flag. He stood there for a moment, the winter air biting at his cheeks, and realized something he hadn't felt in months. Forward momentum. Chapter 4. Glitter bomb memories. James Sylvin had never considered glitter a permanent substance, until he tried to vacuum it out of his carpet for the 100th time. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and the winter sun slanted through the living room window, illuminating tiny flecks of pink and gold embedded in the fibers like stubborn stars. He crouched down, running his fingers over the sparkles. Emma's glitter phase had lasted 2 years, and the house still bore the evidence like battle scars. He smiled, remembering her squeals of delight when she declared the living room a royal ballroom, and dumped an entire jar of glitter onto the rug for ambience. James sighed, leaning back on his heels. The vacuum sat nearby, looking smug and useless. He could hear Emma's voice in his head. Dad, glitter is forever. Like love. She'd been 8 when she said that, wearing a tiara and mismatched socks, and James had believed her. He missed that voice. Missed the way she'd needed him for everything, from tying shoelaces to fixing broken tiaras. Now she was in another state, building a life that didn't include tea parties or glitter bombs. He was proud of her, of course, but pride didn't fill the silence. James stood, brushing glitter from his hands, and wandered into the kitchen. He opened the fridge, stared at the contents like they might offer existential answers, and settled on reheating leftover lasagna. As the microwave hummed, his phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Love you, Dad. Don't forget to eat something green. James chuckled, typing back. Lasagna counts if there's spinach in it, right? Her reply came with a laughing emoji and a heart. It wasn't the same as hearing her voice, but it was something. The microwave beeped. James grabbed his plate and headed back to the living room, only to freeze at the sight of someone standing on his porch. Clara. She was peering through the glass, holding a small paper bag, and wearing an expression that hovered between hopeful and apologetic. James set down his plate and opened the door. Clara, he said, surprised. Hey. Hi, she said, smiling sheepishly. I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to return this. She held up a pair of jumper cables. James blinked. You didn't have to. I know, she said quickly, but I figured you might need them. And, she hesitated, then lifted the bag. I brought muffins. Peace offering for the coffee incident. James chuckled. You didn't need to do that either. Clara shrugged. I'm big on overcompensating. James stepped aside. Come in. She entered, her boots squeaking on the hardwood. Her gaze swept the room, landing on the glitter-speckled carpet. Wow, she said, grinning. Either you had a very festive New Year's, or you live with a unicorn. James laughed. Emma, my daughter. Glitter was her weapon of choice. Clara crouched, touching the carpet like an archaeologist examining ancient ruins. This is impressive. Glitter is basically immortal. Tell me about it, James said. I've tried everything short of fire. Clara looked up at him, eyes warm. You miss her. James nodded, the admission coming easier than he expected. Every day. Clara stood, brushing glitter from her fingers. You know, that's kind of beautiful. James raised an eyebrow. Glitter. No, she said, smiling. Missing someone that much means you love them, right? James felt something shift in his chest, a small, quiet ache that wasn't entirely unpleasant. Yeah, he said softly. I did. Clara glanced around the room, then back at him. So, muffins? James grinned. Muffins. They sat at the kitchen table, sharing blueberry muffins and stories. Clara talked about her work, marketing campaigns that sounded like puzzles with too many pieces, and her volunteer shifts at the animal shelter. James listened, amused by her animated gestures and the way she laughed at her own jokes. You ever think about getting a dog? She asked, licking a crumb from her finger. James shrugged. Thought about it. But I travel sometimes for work and, I don't know, feels like a big commitment. Clara smirked. Says the guy who survived glitter bombs. James chuckled. Fair point. She leaned back, studying him. You're funny. You know that? James blinked. Funny how? Funny like, unexpectedly charming, she said, her tone teasing but her eyes sincere. James felt heat creep up his neck. I'll take that as a compliment. Good, Clara said, smiling. Because it was. Later, as James walked her to the door, Clara paused on the porch. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, like someone had spilled sunset across it. Thanks for letting me invade your Sunday, she said. Any time, James replied, and he meant it. Clara hesitated, then added, Don't be a stranger. James watched her walk down the path, her scarf trailing behind her like a ribbon. He stood there for a moment, the cold biting at his cheeks, and thought about glitter, how it clings, how it refuses to disappear. Maybe some things are meant to stick. Chapter 5. The group text disaster. James Sylvin had never been much of a texter. He preferred phone calls, real voices, real pauses, but lately, texting had become his lifeline. Emma sent him memes and reminders to eat something green. And Clara? Well, Clara had started sending him little bursts of sunshine in the form of messages. It wasn't flirting. Not exactly. Just jokes, funny observations, and the occasional photo of a dog from the shelter. Still, every time his phone buzzed, James felt that ridiculous teenage flutter he thought he'd retired decades ago. On Thursday morning, he sat at his kitchen table, nursing his coffee and scrolling through his neighborhood group chat. It was usually a mix of lost cat alerts, passive-aggressive complaints about recycling bins, and Mrs. Callahan's relentless enthusiasm for themed potlucks. Today's topic: snow shoveling etiquette. James skimmed the thread, amused by the drama over whose sidewalk was a public hazard, when Clara's name popped up in his private messages. Clara, morning. Just saw a golden retriever wearing a sweater. Life is good. James smiled, typing back. That's peak happiness right there. Sweater weather for dogs should be a law. He hit send, then glanced back at the group chat. Someone had posted a photo of a driveway buried under snow with the caption, "Guess who didn't shovel?" The comments were savage. James chuckled, then typed what he thought was a private reply to Clara, a playful follow-up to their ongoing banter. If you ever wear a sweater that cute, I'm buying you pancakes for life. He hit send, and then froze, because the message didn't go to Clara. It went to the neighborhood group chat. 37 members, including Mrs. Callahan. James stared at his phone in horror as the little delivered checkmark mocked him. He considered deleting the message, but it was too late. The replies were already rolling in. Mrs. Callahan. Oh, James. Pancakes for life? That's a commitment. Tom from Unit 3. Bold move. Sylvin. Respect. Linda the yoga lady. Pics or it didn't happen. James groaned, burying his face in his hands. He could practically hear the gossip machine revving up. He typed frantically, "Sorry, everyone. That was meant for someone else. Please ignore." The chat exploded. Mrs. Callahan. We never ignore pancake declarations, hon. Tom from Unit 3. So who's the lucky sweater wearer? Spill. James considered throwing his phone into the nearest snowbank. Instead, he set it down and paced the kitchen, muttering, Great, just great. Public flirting. Exactly what I needed. His phone buzzed again. This time, a private message from Clara. Clara, well, pancakes for life? That's quite the offer. James winced, typing back. I swear that was supposed to be private. Group chat sabotage. Clara, relax. It's hilarious. You've officially become neighborhood entertainment. James sighed. Glad I could provide comic relief. Clara, honestly, I'm flattered. Pancakes for life sounds tempting. James stared at the screen, torn between mortification and relief. Clara wasn't mad. In fact, she seemed amused, maybe even pleased. Before he could respond, another ping from the group chat. Mrs. Callahan. James, sweetheart, we're holding you to this. Pancakes at the next potluck. James groaned. He was never living this down. That evening, James sat on his couch, nursing a beer and contemplating his new status as neighborhood pancake Casanova. His phone buzzed again. Clara, of course. Clara. So, when's my first installment of Lifetime Pancakes? James chuckled, typing back. Whenever you want. Just promise not to wear a sweater that cute in public. I can't handle another scandal. Her reply came with a laughing emoji and a photo of a dog in a ridiculous pink hoodie. Too late. The cuteness is unstoppable. James shook his head, smiling despite himself. Maybe embarrassment wasn't the worst thing in the world. Maybe it was momentum. Chapter 6. The X Factor. James Sylvin had never been a fan of community events. Too many people, too much small talk, and far too many opportunities for awkward encounters. But Mrs. Callahan had cornered him in the driveway with a plate of brownies and a guilt trip that could rival a Catholic grandmother. So here he was, standing in the local recreation center, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm cider like it was a shield. The New Year's mixer was in full swing. String lights twinkled overhead, a playlist of upbeat pop songs hummed in the background, and neighbors mingled around tables laden with potluck dishes. James scanned the room, hoping to spot Clara. She texted earlier, might swing by. Save me a muffin if they have any. He'd replied with a thumbs up and a silent prayer that she'd show up soon. Because 5 minutes ago, James had seen her, his ex-wife, Melissa. She was by the snack table, laughing at something a man in a tailored blazer said. Her hair was shorter now, stylish and sharp, and she wore a dress that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread titled Effortless Elegance. James felt a pang, not of longing, but of memory. 17 years of shared life didn't vanish just because the paperwork said so. He considered slipping out the door, but Mrs. Callahan intercepted him with a hug and a plate of deviled eggs. James, you made it. Oh, you're going to have so much fun. Fun, James echoed weakly, scanning for escape routes. And then salvation. James. Clara's voice rang out like a lifeline. He turned to see her weaving through the crowd, scarf trailing behind her like a comet. She wore a navy sweater, jeans, and a smile that could melt glaciers. You came, James said, relief flooding his tone. Of course, Clara said, grinning. Wouldn't miss a chance to watch you socialize under duress. James chuckled. You have no idea. Clara tilted her head. You look like a man about to face a firing squad. What's going on? James hesitated, then nodded toward the snack table. Melissa, my ex. Clara followed his gaze, her expression flickering with curiosity before settling into something mischievous. Ah, the X Factor. James groaned. Please don't call it that. Clara smirked. Relax. You're doing great. Standing upright, breathing solid start. James laughed despite himself. Thanks for the pep talk. Anytime, Clara said, looping her arm through his. Come on, let's make this less painful. They navigated toward the drinks table, Clara chatting easily about the playlist and the questionable casserole selection. James felt his shoulders loosen. Clara had that effect, like sunlight breaking through clouds. And then Melissa noticed him. James, she said, her voice smooth as ever. She approached with the man in the blazer trailing behind like a well-trained accessory. It's been a while. Melissa, James replied, keeping his tone polite. Good to see you. Melissa's eyes flicked to Clara, who was currently examining a tray of cookies with exaggerated seriousness. And you are? Clara, Clara said brightly, turning with a smile that could disarm a tank. Friend of James, muffin enthusiast, occasional car trouble victim. Melissa blinked, clearly thrown by Clara's cheer. Well, nice to meet you. Likewise, Clara said, her tone warm but her eyes sparkling with mischief. James was just telling me about the glitter situation at his house. Epic stuff. Melissa's brows knit. Glitter. James coughed. Emma's old craft projects. Clara grinned. Permanent installation, really? Adds character. Melissa offered a tight smile, then turned back to her companion. We should grab seats. Enjoy, James said, forcing a smile as they walked away. Clara waited until they were out of earshot before whispering. Wow, she's intense. James chuckled. She's Melissa. Clara bumped his shoulder playfully. You handled that well. No awkward pancake offers. James groaned. Don't remind me. Clara laughed, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Seriously though, you're good. Civil, calm, and you didn't spontaneously combust. Gold star. James smiled, feeling the tension ebb. Thanks. Couldn't have done it without my wing woman. Clara raised her cup in a mock toast. To glitter, muffins, and surviving X encounters. James clinked his cup against hers. I'll drink to that. Later, as they left the mixer, James walked Clara to her car. The night air was crisp, the stars sharp against the dark sky. Thanks for coming, James said. You made that bearable. Clara smiled. Anytime. Besides, I like watching you squirm. It's endearing. James chuckled. Glad my discomfort is entertaining. Clara tilted her head, her expression softening. You're a good guy, James. Melissa might not have seen it, but I do. James felt the words settle deep, warm and unexpected. Clara. She grinned, breaking the moment before it could turn heavy. Now, about those lifetime pancakes. James laughed, shaking his head. You're relentless. Adaptable, Clara corrected, winking as she slid into her car. Just like you. James watched her drive away, the taillights glowing like embers in the dark. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't dared hope for. Possibility. Chapter 7. A daughter's perspective. James Sylvin was halfway through folding laundry, a task that felt more like a meditation these days, when his phone buzzed with a video call. He glanced at the screen and smiled. Emma. He swiped to answer, and her face filled the display. Bright-eyed, hair pulled into a messy bun. A dorm room backdrop cluttered with textbooks and string lights. Dad, she said, grinning. You look domestic. James held up a towel like a trophy. Laundry day. Don't judge. Emma laughed. Never. You're thriving. James chuckled. Thriving might be a stretch. Emma tilted her head, studying him. You look good, though. Happier than last time we talked. James shrugged, trying to play it cool. Maybe I am. Emma narrowed her eyes. Okay, spill. What's going on? James hesitated. He wasn't sure how much to share. Emma was 20, smart and perceptive, qualities that made hiding things from her impossible. Still, he didn't want to sound like a teenager with a crush. Met someone, he said finally, keeping his tone casual. Emma's eyebrows shot up. Met someone? Like, someone. James smiled. Her name's Clara. We've had coffee. And pancakes. Emma squealed so loudly James had to lower the volume. Dad, that's amazing. Tell me everything. James laughed, shaking his head. There's not much to tell. She's funny, smart, kind of chaotic. Emma grinned. Sounds perfect. James felt a warmth spread through his chest. She's different. Makes me laugh. Emma leaned closer to the camera, her expression softening. You deserve that, Dad. James swallowed against the sudden lump in his throat. Thanks, kiddo. Emma smirked. So what's the plan? Are you going to ask her out? James hesitated. We've hung out a couple times. I don't want to rush things. Emma rolled her eyes. Dad, you're not rushing. You're existing, which is good. You've been in hermit mode for months. James chuckled. Hermit mode has its perks. Not anymore, Emma said firmly. You need to live a little. Go on a real date. Do something fun. And send me pictures. James laughed. Pictures? What is this, a reality show? Emma grinned. Exactly. Single dad gets his groove back. I'd watch that. James shook his head, smiling despite himself. You're relentless. Adaptable, Emma said, echoing Clara's word without knowing it. Just like you. James felt the coincidence like a nudge from the universe. We'll see, he said, trying to sound non-committal. Emma leaned back, her smile soft. Seriously, Dad, you've spent years taking care of me. It's okay to take care of yourself now. James stared at her, pride and love swelling in equal measure. You're pretty wise for a kid who once glued macaroni to the wall. Emma laughed. Artistic genius. Thank you very much. They talked for another 20 minutes. Classes, friends, a roommate who collected novelty mugs, before Emma signed off with a cheerful, go live your life, Dad, and text me if you need outfit advice. James ended the call, staring at the blank screen for a moment. His heart felt lighter, his resolve stronger. Emma was right. He'd spent so long being needed that he'd forgotten what it felt like to want something for himself. And right now he wanted Clara. That evening, James sat on the couch, phone in hand, debating his next move. He could text her. Something casual, something safe. Or he could do what Emma suggested. Live a little. He opened the messaging app, typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, he settled on, how do you feel about dinner that doesn't involve pancakes? He hit send before he could overthink it. Seconds later, the reply came. Clara, depends. Are you promising no coffee spills? James grinned, typing back. Scout's honor. Her response was instant. Clara, then I'm in. Friday. James stared at the screen, a smile spreading across his face. Forward momentum. Chapter 8. The almost date. James Sylvin had planned this dinner like a military operation. He'd picked a quiet Italian restaurant, warm lighting, soft music, no risk of glitter bombs or pancake scandals. He even ironed his shirt, which was a rare event in the Sylvin household. Everything was set for a smooth, grown-up evening. And then the universe laughed. It started with traffic. A fender bender on Main Street turned a 15-minute drive into 45. By the time James pulled into the restaurant parking lot, he was sweating like he'd run a marathon. He checked his watch. 10 minutes late. Not catastrophic, but enough to make him mutter, "Great start, Sylvin." He hurried inside, scanning the room for Clara. She was easy to spot, seated at a corner table, scrolling her phone, scarf draped over the chair like a signature flourish. When she looked up and smiled, James felt the tension in his shoulders ease. "You made it," Clara said, standing to greet him. "I was about to send a search party." James chuckled. "Traffic. I swear half the town decided to crash into each other tonight." Clara grinned. "Adds drama to the evening." James slid into his seat, trying to shake off the chaos. "Thanks for waiting." "Of course," Clara said, her tone light. "I figured you'd show up eventually. You seem like the dependable type." James smiled. "I try." The waiter appeared, menus in hand. James reached for his water glass and promptly knocked it over. The glass tipped, sending a tidal wave across the table and straight into Clara's lap. "Oh my God." James grabbed napkins, mortified. "I'm so sorry." Clara burst out laughing, holding her hands up like a crime scene victim. "James, you promised no spills." James groaned, blotting the table. "I swear I'm cursed." Clara grinned, eyes sparkling. "Relax. It's just water. If it were red wine, we'd have a real tragedy." James chuckled despite his embarrassment. "I'm buying dessert to make up for this." "Deal," Clara said, still laughing. "But only if it's chocolate." They ordered pasta for James, risotto for Clara, and settled into conversation. Despite the rocky start, the evening began to flow. Clara talked about her latest marketing project, which involved convincing people that a vacuum cleaner was a lifestyle choice. James shared stories from his consulting work, peppered with dry humor that made Clara laugh so hard she nearly snorted. "You're funny," she said, wiping her eyes. "Like genuinely funny. Not dad joke funny." James grinned. High praise. Clara leaned in, her expression softening. "Seriously, though, you're easy to talk to." James felt the words land like a warm hand on his chest. "Same," he said quietly. For a moment, the noise of the restaurant faded. It was just them, two people who'd stumbled into each other's orbit and somehow found gravity. And then the karaoke started. James blinked as a man in a sequin jacket appeared near the bar, belting out "Livin' on a Prayer" like his life depended on it. Clara clapped her hands in delight. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This is amazing." James groaned. This was not in the mission plan. Clara grinned, eyes dancing. "Come on, James. Live a little." Before he could protest, she was on her feet, dragging him toward the makeshift stage. James tried to resist, truly, but Clara's laughter was magnetic. "Clara," he hissed. "I don't sing." "Perfect," she said, shoving a microphone into his hand. "Neither do I." The music shifted to Sweet Caroline. Clara started swaying, belting out the lyrics with zero shame. James stood frozen for 2 beats, then, against all odds, joined in. Badly, off-key, but with enough enthusiasm to make Clara laugh so hard she doubled over. By the time they returned to their table, breathless and grinning, James felt something he hadn't felt in years. Free. Later, as they walked to the parking lot, Clara looped her arm through his. "You were a good sport." James chuckled. "I'm pretty sure I traumatized half the restaurant." Clara smiled. "Nah, you were great. And brave." James raised an eyebrow. "Brave?" "Absolutely," Clara said. "Most people would have bolted." "You leaned in." James shrugged, feeling oddly proud. "Guess I'm adaptable." Clara stopped by her car, turning to face him. "You are." For a moment, the air between them hummed, charged, expectant. James wanted to kiss her. He wanted to close the gap and see if the spark he felt was real. But then Clara's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She glanced at the screen, grimaced. "Work emergency. I've got to run." James nodded, masking his disappointment. "Go save the world." Clara smiled, squeezing his arm. "Rain check." "Definitely," James said. He watched her drive away, the taillights glowing like punctuation marks on a sentence he wasn't ready to end. Chapter 9. Vulnerability and glitter. James Sylvin had never thought a hardware store could feel romantic, but here he was, standing in aisle 7 holding a pack of light bulbs, while Clara debated the merits of matte versus glossy paint finishes like they were matters of national security. "This one," she said, holding up a swatch of pale blue. "It's calming. Like a spa." James raised an eyebrow. "For a laundry room?" Clara grinned. "Why not? Laundry deserves serenity." James chuckled, tossing the light bulbs into the cart. "You're full of surprises." Clara smirked. "You have no idea." They wandered toward the checkout, their conversation easy, punctuated by laughter. It wasn't a date, not officially, but it felt like one. After the karaoke chaos, Clara had suggested a low-key errand hangout. James had agreed, partly because he needed light bulbs, mostly because he wanted to see her again. As they stepped outside, the winter air nipped at their cheeks. Clara pulled her scarf tighter, then glanced at James. "So, you never told me why you're so good at jumper cables." James smiled. "Years of practice. My old car was basically a paperweight with wheels." Clara laughed, then sobered slightly. "Seriously, though, you seem steady, like someone who's always prepared." James shrugged. "Comes with being a dad, I guess." Clara tilted her head. "You really loved it, didn't you?" Being a father. James felt the question settle deep. He nodded. Still do. Even if Emma's off living her best life now. Clara smiled softly. That's good. Some people treat parenting like a chore. James's voice warmed. Not me. It was everything. The tea parties, the glitter bombs, the late night talks about why the moon follows the car. I miss it. Clara's eyes softened. Sounds like you were a great dad. James swallowed against the lump in his throat. I tried. When Melissa left, I thought, maybe I wasn't enough. For her. For anyone. Clara stopped walking, turning to face him. James. He met her gaze, surprised by the intensity there. You are enough, she said firmly. Melissa leaving says more about her than you. James blinked, the words hitting harder than he expected. You really think so? Clara smiled, gentle but unwavering. I know so. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them, their breath mingling in the cold, their eyes locked like two people standing on the edge of something new. Then Clara grinned, breaking the tension with a mischievous glint. Besides, anyone who survives glitter bombs deserves a medal. James laughed, the heaviness lifting. Glitter is forever. Like love, Clara said, echoing Emma's childhood wisdom without knowing it. James stared at her, something warm and dangerous blooming in his chest. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to tell her that her words mattered more than she knew. But instead he said, coffee. Clara smiled. Only if you promise not to spill. James grinned. Scout's honor. They ended up at a cozy cafe, tucked into a corner booth with steaming mugs and a shared slice of chocolate cake. Conversation flowed. Light, then deep, then light again, like a tide neither of them wanted to fight. Clara told him about her own heartbreak, about the man who couldn't handle life without control. James listened, his chest tightening with empathy. When she laughed at herself, I stayed way too long, thinking I could fix him. James reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You deserve better, he said quietly. Clara's fingers curled around his, her smile soft. So do you. The moment stretched, warm and fragile. James felt something shift, like a door opening inside him, letting in light he hadn't realized he needed. Later, as they walked to their cars, Clara paused by hers, turning to him with a smile that was equal parts playful and tender. Thanks for today, she said. And for listening. James nodded. Anytime. Clara hesitated, then added, don't be a stranger. James smiled. Not a chance. He watched her drive away, the taillights glowing like embers in the dark. And for the first time in years, James felt not just possibility but hope. Chapter 10. The big gesture. James Sylvin had never been the grand gesture type. He wasn't the guy who rented billboards or hired flash mobs. But as he stood in the craft aisle of a discount store, staring at a shelf stacked with glitter jars, he realized something. If he was going to tell Clara how he felt, it had to mean something. Something that said, I see you, I get you, and I'm willing to risk vacuuming glitter for the rest of my life if it makes you smile. So he bought 6 jars. Pink, gold, silver, and one labeled Rainbow Explosion that looked like chaos in powdered form. He added a pack of balloons, a roll of tape, and a card that read You're unstoppable. It wasn't perfect, but it was him. Friday evening, James transformed his living room into a glitter-strewn battlefield. He taped balloons to chairs, sprinkled glitter across the coffee table, and arranged muffins in a circle like offerings to a deity of chaos. When he stepped back to admire his work, the room looked like a unicorn had detonated, but in a good way. He texted Clara, need a favor. Swing by if you can. Promise no jumper cables involved. Her reply came fast, curiosity piqued. On my way. James's heart thudded like a drumline. He checked the mirror, shirt clean, hair decent, and tried not to look like a man who'd spent an hour debating balloon symmetry. The doorbell rang. James opened the door to find Clara standing there, cheeks pink from the cold, scarf trailing like a comet. She stepped inside and froze. Oh, my God. Her eyes swept the room, widening at the glitter, the balloons, the muffin altar. James, what happened here? Did you lose a bet? James grinned, nerves buzzing under his skin. No bet, just a gesture. Clara blinked. A gesture? James nodded, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. You told me glitter is forever, like love, and you were right. So, here's my way of saying I'm not afraid of forever. Or glitter. Or you. Clara stared at him, lips parted, eyes shimmering like the jars on the table. For a heartbeat, James wondered if he'd gone too far. If this was less romantic and more crime scene for craft supplies. Then Clara laughed, a bright, unfiltered sound that filled the room like sunlight. She covered her mouth, tears springing to her eyes from sheer amusement. James, she said, stepping closer. This is insane. Adaptable, James corrected, smiling. Clara shook her head, still laughing. You're ridiculous. Maybe, James said softly, but I'm ridiculous about you. The laughter faded, replaced by something quieter, deeper. Clara's smile softened as she reached up, brushing a fleck of glitter from his cheek. You know, she murmured, I think I like ridiculous. James swallowed, his pulse roaring in his ears. Good. Because I'm not done. He handed her the card, the one that said you're unstoppable. Clara opened it, reading the words he'd scrawled inside. Life's messy. Glitter sticks. And I'd like to stick around with you. Clara looked up, eyes shining. James. He didn't wait for permission. He closed the gap, cupping her face gently, and kissed her. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a movie-perfect dip and swoon. It was warm and real and tasted faintly of chocolate muffins. And for James, it was everything. When they finally pulled apart, Clara laughed softly, resting her forehead against his. You know this glitter is never coming out, right? James grinned. Good. A reminder. Clara smiled, her voice a whisper. Of what? James kissed her again, slow and certain. That some things are meant to stick. Later, as they sat on the couch surrounded by balloons and muffins, Clara flicked a speck of glitter from her sleeve. So, what's next? James smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. Dinner that doesn't involve karaoke. Maybe a dog. Definitely more muffins. Clara laughed, leaning against him. Sounds perfect. James wrapped an arm around her, the weight of loneliness lifting like snow in sunlight. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. Chapter 11. The daughter meets Clara. James Sylvin had rehearsed this moment in his head at least a dozen times. None of those rehearsals involved glitter still clinging to his carpet or balloons deflating in the corner like sad party guests. But life wasn't a rehearsal. It was messy, unpredictable, and occasionally covered in rainbow sparkles. He sat on the couch, phone in hand, waiting for Emma's video call. Clara was beside him, legs tucked under her, sipping tea from a mug that said Chaos Coordinator. James had bought it for her as a joke. She'd claimed it as a badge of honor. You sure about this? Clara asked, her tone light but her eyes searching. James smiled. Emma's going to love you. Clara raised an eyebrow. You sound very confident for someone whose daughter once glued macaroni to the wall. James chuckled. She's got good taste. Eventually, before Clara could reply, the phone buzzed. James swiped to answer, and Emma's face filled the screen. Bright-eyed, messy bun, dorm room chaos in the background. Dad, she said, grinning. You look festive? James glanced at the glitter-speckled coffee table and winced. Long story. Emma's eyes narrowed playfully. And who's that? She leaned closer to the camera, spotting Clara. Clara smiled, lifting her mug in a mock toast. Hi, Emma. I'm Clara, professional klutz, occasional muffin supplier. Emma blinked, then grinned so wide James thought her face might split. Oh my God, Dad. You didn't tell me she was gorgeous. James felt heat creep up his neck. Emma. Clara laughed, cheeks pink. You're sweet. Emma leaned back, eyes sparkling with mischief. So, Clara, what's your deal? Are you into karaoke disasters and glitter explosions? Because that's my dad's brand now. Clara shot James a teasing look. I'm adaptable. Emma clapped her hands. Perfect answer. Dad needs someone adaptable. James groaned. Can we not turn this into an interrogation? Emma ignored him completely. Clara, do you like dogs? Love them, Clara said. I volunteer at a shelter. Emma gasped. Dad, she's perfect. Lock it down. James buried his face in his hands. This is not how I pictured this conversation. Clara laughed, resting a hand on his arm. I like her. Emma smirked. I like you too. Finally, someone who can handle his weird pancake obsession. James peeked through his fingers. Emma. What? Emma said, grinning. You offered pancakes for life in a group chat. The internet never forgets. Clara snorted, nearly spilling her tea. You didn't tell me that part. James groaned. Remind me to revoke your daughter's sense of humor. Emma winked. Too late. It's genetic. They talked for another 20 minutes. Emma asking questions, Clara answering with charm and wit, James alternating between pride and mild humiliation. When the call ended, Emma blew a kiss to the camera. Love you, Dad. And Clara? Take care of him. He's a good one. Clara smiled softly. I will. The screen went dark. James set the phone aside, exhaling like he'd just run a marathon. Well, Clara said, eyes twinkling. That was fun. James chuckled. Fun for you, maybe. I aged 5 years. Clara leaned against him, her voice warm. She's amazing. James nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Yeah, she is. Clara's hand slid into his, fingers lacing with quiet certainty. So are you. James turned to her, heart thudding. Clara. She smiled, gentle and sure. You don't have to say anything. But James did. I want to. And then he kissed her. Soft, slow, like a promise. Chapter 12. Love in full color. James Sylvin had always thought love was something that happened in grand, cinematic moments, fireworks, sweeping music, dramatic declarations. Turns out, it could also happen in a kitchen at 9 p.m. with 2 people eating leftover muffins and laughing about a dog video. Clara was perched on the counter, swinging her legs, her laughter ringing like bells. James leaned against the opposite counter, watching her with a smile that felt too big for his face. You know, Clara said between giggles, if you keep sending me videos of dogs and sweaters, I'm going to start expecting a puppy. James grinned. Noted. I'll start researching breeds. Clara tilted her head, eyes sparkling. You'd actually do that? James shrugged, pretending nonchalance. Maybe. Clara hopped down, closing the distance between them. You're dangerous, James Sylvin. James raised an eyebrow. Dangerous? Yeah, Clara said softly. You make things feel easy. James swallowed, his pulse quickening. Is that bad? Clara shook her head, her smile gentle now. No, it's terrifying. James frowned. Terrifying? Because easy feels like safe, Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. And safe feels like something I could fall into without meaning to. James stared at her, the weight of her words settling deep. Clara. She looked up, eyes shimmering with vulnerability. I've been burned before, James. I told myself I wouldn't do this again. James stepped closer, his voice steady. I'm not him. I know, Clara said quickly. You're different. That's what scares me. James reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers like a promise. I'm scared too. Clara blinked. You? James nodded. I spent years thinking I was boring, forgettable. Melissa leaving felt like proof. And then you showed up with coffee spills and glitter jokes and suddenly I'm alive again. That's terrifying. Clara's breath hitched, her fingers curling around his. So what do we do? James smiled, slow and certain. We take a chance. Clara searched his face, her eyes softening. You really want this? James squeezed her hand. More than I've wanted anything in a long time. For a moment, silence stretched, warm, fragile, full of possibility. Then Clara smiled, a smile that lit up the room like sunrise. Okay, she whispered. Let's take that chance. James exhaled, relief and joy crashing over him like a wave. He pulled her close, kissing her like a man who'd finally found his way home. Later, they sat on the couch, fingers intertwined, the quiet humming with something new and electric. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. You know, she murmured, I think I like this color. James glanced down at her. Color. Clara smiled. Life feels brighter. James kissed the top of her head, his chest swelling with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, joy, love in full color. Chapter 13. Epilogue, Glitter Never Dies. 1 year later, James Sylvin's living room looked like a party planner had collided with a craft store and lost. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling, streamers curled across the mantel, and glitter was everywhere. On the coffee table, in the carpet, clinging to the sleeves of James's sweater like stubborn memories. He didn't mind. Not anymore. The clock ticked toward midnight, and laughter filled the house. A sound James had missed for so long it felt like oxygen now. Clara was in the kitchen, orchestrating a muffin and champagne pairing like it was a Michelin-starred event. Emma sat on the couch, home from college for winter break, teasing James about his playlist choices. Dad, Emma said, holding up her phone. This is vintage. James grinned. Classic. Emma rolled her eyes. Classic is code for old. Clara breezed in, carrying a tray of muffins dusted with edible glitter. Don't knock the classics, she said, winking at James. They're reliable. Emma smirked. Like Dad. James raised his glass. I'll take that as a compliment. Clara set the tray down, sliding onto the couch beside him. So, Mr. Reliable, she teased. How does it feel hosting your first New Year's party in, what, a decade? James looked around. At the balloons, the glitter, the people he loved, and smiled. Feels like home. Emma grinned, leaning against him. You did good, Dad. James kissed the top of her head, his chest swelling with pride and gratitude. Thanks, kiddo. Clara reached for his hand, her fingers lacing with his in a gesture so natural it felt inevitable. You did more than good, she said softly. You made life sparkle again. James chuckled. With a little help from glitter. Clara laughed, brushing a fleck from his cheek. Glitter never dies. James kissed her. Quick, warm, full of promise. Emma groaned dramatically. Ugh, parents. Clara grinned. Not parents, partners. James felt the word settle deep, solid and right. Partners. In chaos, in laughter, in life. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8, and voices rose in unison. James wrapped an arm around Clara, his other around Emma, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel the ache of what was missing. He felt the joy of what he'd found. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. Glitter rained down like confetti, catching the light, clinging to everything it touched. James laughed, pulling Clara close, his voice a whisper against her hair. Some things, he said, are meant to stick.